Hello everyone, my name is Preston Dennett, and welcome to a brand new episode of UFOs and the Paranormal. I've got a really interesting and unusual episode for you today. I call it Alien Books. And this may sound unusual, but I have collected about a dozen cases in which people have been taken on board a UFO and have been handed an alien book. These cases are really interesting. There are a few which are well known, but I think you probably haven't heard of most of these. And at the end of this video, I have a very special treat for you with a first-hand interview with a witness who has actually held one of these books. So that is what this video is about today. I think it has a lot to say about the ETs and what they know and their agenda and so forth. And it's just really fascinating stuff. So let's get started. And the first case I want to talk about is, of course, the very famous Betty and Barney Hill incident. This took place in 1961 in the White Mountains of New Hampshire when Betty and Barney Hill were taken on board. This is the first publicized UFO abduction case. And what many people don't know is that Betty very nearly got to take home an alien book. And she certainly got a good look at it. This happened right at the end of their experience, and Betty was about to go and exit the craft. And she tried to get this book, and she almost got it. And I will just let Betty say in her own words what happened. I started talking with the leader, and I said to him that this had been quite an experience. It was unbelievable that no one would ever believe me, and that most people don't know he was alive, and that what I needed was some proof that this had really happened. So he laughed, and he said, "What kind of proof did I want? What would I like?" And I said, "Well, if you could give me something to take back with me, then people would believe it." So he told me to look around and maybe I could find something I would like to take. And I did. And there wasn't much around, but on the cabinet there was a book, a fairly big book. So I put my hand on the book and I said, "Could I have this?" The leader agreed, and Betty picked up the book. She said that the writing looked unfamiliar and appeared to go up and down in columns. As she says, it had pages, it had writing, but nothing like I had ever seen before. I opened the book and found symbols written in long, narrow columns. I had never seen anything like it. It was different. I don't know, because it was, I couldn't tell. Even though I have seen Japanese written, it had sharp lines, and some were very thin, some were medium, and some were very heavy. It had some dots, it had straight lines and curved lines. And the leader laughed, and he asked me if I thought I could read it. And I told him no. I laughed too. I said no, but I wasn't taking it to read. But this was going to be my proof that this really happened, that this was my proof. And so he said that I could have it. I could have the book if I wanted it. And I picked it up and I was delighted. This was more than I had ever hoped for. And I'm standing there and I'm saying I had never seen anything like the book and that I was very pleased that he had given it to me and that maybe, some way, I could figure out in time how to read it. So Betty held tightly onto the book as the ETs continued to ask her questions. She was shown the familiar star map that apparently shows Zeta Reticulum. Finally, the experience comes to an end, and Betty and Barney are being ushered down this ramp towards their car. And Betty was literally about to exit the UFO when suddenly the ETs changed their minds. And as Betty says, "I'm ready to go down the ramp when some of the other men, not the leader, but some of the other men are talking. I don't know what they're saying, but they are very excited. And then the leader comes over and takes my book. And I say, 'Oh!' I'm furious. And I said, 'You promised that I could have the book.' The alien replied, 'I know it, but the others object.' Betty said, 'This is my proof.' And the leader replied, 'That's the whole point. They don't want you to know what happened. They want you to forget all about it.' Betty said, You can take the book, but you can never, never, never make me forget about it, because I'll remember if it's the last thing I do. So at this point, Betty and the ETs are arguing about whether she would remember the experience. She was told that she would be made to forget. Betty, of course, objected, and as we now know, she did eventually remember. Unfortunately, she didn't get the book. So that's Betty Hill's experience with an alien book. And wow, what a shame she didn't get to keep it. That could have changed the course of UFO research. Unfortunately, it did not happen. But it's certainly not the only case. And in fact, there's another very well-known abductee, contactee, who actually did get to keep the book and take it home and read it over a period of weeks. And this lady is, of course, Betty Andreasson, the very well-known contactee from Ashburnham, Massachusetts. She's had a series of books written about her case by Raymond Fowler. And Betty's case is very, very extensive. And what I'd like to talk about here, of course, is her experience with this ET book. And this occurred in 1967 is when her first major experience happened. She's a lifelong contactee. But in 1967, a UFO landed in her backyard. Several ETs came into the home, and Betty was taken on board. And she actually gave the ETs a book, her very much cherished Bible. And in exchange, Betty was given a thin blue book to keep at her home, at least temporarily. And I'll just let Betty describe this incident. As she says, and I quote, "I glanced down and I picked up the Bible that was on the end of the table. I turned and I passed it to the leader. The leader passed me a little thin blue book in exchange. I started to look at the little blue book. And the first 3 pages are snow white, luminous white. And I saw this silver gray top thing with like coils. And there was a sort of a wheel, and inside were 4 things. I can't make out what these things are." At this point, everyone in the house, her family, had been put into a sort of trance-like state. Betty's daughter, Becky, however, did wake up and witness what was happening. So she saw this firsthand, and as she says, "It looks like a clay man talking to my mom, some kind of man creature. My mom was standing there with her hand on something, and that clay form had his hand on the other part, like a book. That book, it was bright, and Mom was thanking them for something. So it must have been the blue book." So at this point, Betty is taken on board and has a long, involved experience. And she was returned to her home, and the ETs reminded her again of the blue book. She was told that it would be hers, quote, "for a time," and that she should study it. And she asked the ETs why they had given her the book, and the ET replied, "It is given to you for a while to grasp as much as you might grasp from it. There is writing there that will be discerned only through the Spirit, and it's the writing of light. It can be understood only through the Spirit. The other writing that is upon that is for man to seek and find out. There are formulas and riddles and poems and writings for man to understand nature, for he too is nature. He is formed from love, and love is the answer for man." So following this encounter, Betty put the blue book in the closet and went to bed. And after the abduction, she was told that she would forget the incident, and she did. She forgot much of what happened, though she was left with a partial memory of the ETs entering into her house and taking her into the UFO, and she did remember being given this blue book. It was 3 days after the incident that she first took it out and examined it, and she even showed it to her daughter, Becky. She said, I'll show you." And as Betty says, "I did take the blue book out. I just see us. She's sitting on my bed, and I'm going to the closet. There's a noise in the kitchen, and so I put it back, and I closed the closet. And I went out into the kitchen, and I told her, 'Shush, Wait a minute, honey. I'll be right back." I went out into the kitchen, and it was just Jimmy and Mark coming in for a drink of water. I went to get the book again, and I showed Becky. I told her, "Now don't tell anybody, will you, honey? Because it's very important. It's from Jesus." Becky's face just lit right up. She was beaming, and she was so happy and excited over it. She said, "That's what they gave you, Mommy. I remember. That's what they gave you." So Betty was a little bit nervous about showing off this book because the ETs had told her specifically that it was for her alone and that it, quote, "must not be seen by any that were not worthy," because it was for initiation, and Becky was too young to go through too many things yet in order to see it. It was a book of initiation of mysteries and of everything that is. It is because of things I have gone through and yet have stood fast. I was supposed to look at it and grasp as much as I could possibly grasp for the future. So later, 9 days after the initial encounter, Betty locked all the doors, sat down alone to examine this book more closely. And as she says, "I was just at the kitchen table there, and I was opening the book. There is something there on the cover. What is it? It's like in the very center. It's very thin gold. It just looks Egyptian." According to Betty, this book was about 40 extremely thin pages. One side of the pages had strange printing and symbols, and the other side was a glowing white. As Betty says, "There is strange writing in it, and numbers. The first 3 pages were just white light glowing. There's all sorts of symbols. 1 comma, dash, like a curlicue of some kind, a sweeping under and a circle. And there are 2 lines close to each other with a kind of rounded line on top, like, with 2 sides. A 0 with a dot, and some kind of line on an angle going through that with a little flag-type thing on the line. There are diamonds with a dot in the middle. There's something like a staff, and there are arrows. There's something that is on an angle. It's a rectangle on a side, and it goes out. A pyramid, but a strange type of pyramid. It has a chute on it, and it has an arrow, some type of arrow. It's all strange, all strange. It's like takeoff things for an airplane, or something like pyramids with, it's just hard to explain. There's a mechanical thing that I could draw. It is mysterious because of the strangeness of it." After just over a week, Betty discovered that this book was missing, and she could only assume that the ETs had taken it because they had told her it was hers for just a short period of time. But she did get to examine it closely. She saw these ET symbols, as Betty Hill did. So it's another really interesting case of an ET book. And perhaps an even more interesting case comes from a gentleman who has just put out a new book. His name is Jeff Selver, and his book is called The Rising. It's a very interesting book. Jeff Selver has had UFO encounters his whole life, and he writes about them in this really interesting book. And in 1993, at age 16, he was taken on board and did, in fact, see a book. This is in the town of Coquitlam in British Columbia in Canada. And Jeff was walking home one day, and he was confronted by a gray ET. He got a really friendly feeling from this gray, who told him, "Come into our ship. We'll bring you right back." And Jeff agreed, and he was pulled on board, and inside the grays began to speak to him about his life, about what would happen to him in the future, about his relationships with his girlfriend and so forth, and was told that he would be working with them if he agreed to do so, and he did. After this, he was physically examined, had some medical procedures. He had a very powerful and profound spiritual experience involving his higher self and past lives and future lives and this sort of thing. And after this, he was taken to another room where he was allowed to see a, quote, mystical book. He was showed the book by one of these ETs, who we called the Elder, and he was told to touch it. And as Jeff says, and I quote, "I opened it up, and I could see their script, and it glowed a metallic blue. Abstract red and yellow 3D holograms came out of the pages, seeming to represent ideas that didn't make much sense to me. There was a feeling that what was happening was spiritual or ritualistic. She said, 'Look at the book.' I didn't understand. I thought for a second, but I can't read this. Then as I stared at the book, it became hypnotic. I could feel it had a mystical power. Then, startled, sections of the book began entering my mind, like my brain was a vacuum or a hard drive, and it was being downloaded into it. At the time, I was just a recipient of those strange and fascinating events happening around me, unclear how they were coming. When it was done, she slapped the book closed. She then brought her left hand up to my right temple. I could feel a psychic force bury the book deep in my subconscious. It seemed the state I was in allowed this book to go deep inside me. She said, 'This will be for later.' Then she put the book back." At this point, his onboard experience ended and he was returned, though of course more would follow throughout his life. And much later in life, Jeff Selver actually remembered the contents of this book. And in fact, he devoted the last chapter of his book, The Rising, to what he learned from this mystical book. And it's very, very interesting. I won't go all into it. You'll have to read the book. But I will say that it was about various spiritual issues, such as how humans are much more than their physical body, how spirituality and psychic development is really important, how to achieve the state of levitation, and more. There was a section about God, the divine source, time and how it's eternal, and the human connection to all these things. It talked about the power of imagination, observation and perception, and how the universe is made of light, colors, and shapes. It talked about the power of consciousness and the holographic nature of the universe. It talked about the power of love, how to heal oneself and others. So a lot of very deeply spiritual and profound subjects. Really interesting. So this is the theme that seems to be turning up in a lot of these ET books. And another case comes from UFO researcher Richard Boylan in his book, Close Extraterrestrial Encounters. This is one of the first books to sort of portray the ET contact experience in a very positive light. And this case involves a gentleman by the name of Mike from Northern California. And in 1968, at age 11, Mike was taken from his backyard into a UFO. On board, he saw grays, praying mantis-like ETs, and what he described as plump, human-looking beings. He was physically examined, he had a medical procedure, and at one point he was handed a book. And I will let Mike describe in his own words. As he says, "One of the plump beings walked over to me carrying a velvet bag. He reached in and took out a thick, large black book. The book had rows of 3 Chinese-type bright orange letters. And I was told that the book was the, quote, Book of Truth. And I had known well its contents, but I had forgotten. A number of ideas about the book burst into my head that I have still not been able to decipher, but I believe the contents were about the balance of the universe, love of all things, the peril of earth, and coming changes. I was then told I would remember the contents of the book when I turned 33. I was told that they had come to me because I was sort of their family. They turned over the book and showed me a bright orange symbol that looked like the sun, its rays swept by the wind. And they said if I were to ever get lonely, I should remember the symbol." So that was his experience with this E.T. book. And as the years passed, Mike had more experiences. He grew up. He was interviewed by Richard Boylan in his 30s. And by age 36, he did remember some of what this book contained, or at least he felt like it had influenced his life. As he says, and I quote, "I have felt a greater understanding of natural events and have had what I would consider a heightened spiritual view of the world. It has been much easier to balance my work and fulfill my interests in all things spiritual." So he's saying this in reference to what he thinks he learned from this book, but he can't say he specifically remembers any passages in detail. But it's certainly a very interesting case of another person who has seen a book on board a UFO. And there are other cases. Another somewhat different and really poignant case comes from researcher David Jacobs, PhD. In his book, The Threat, he tells the account of a lady who he's given, I think it's a pseudonym, Carla Enders. And at age 11, Carla was taken on board to interact with another hybrid, half-human, half-ET child about her own age. This was something that Carla had experienced a number of times. And on this occasion, Carla was taken to a room where she saw a big pile of books. And this little hybrid girl took her to these books and opened one up and started sharing it with her. And as Carla says, there's a lot of books, all different books for different kids, different ages, stacked in piles. And so Carla sits down with this hybrid girl, and they start looking through this book. And Carla can see it's a picture book, like a children's book. There's writing, and there are pictures of what appear to be typical Earth-like scenes. Kids with their families, animals, dogs in the park. As Carla says, and I quote, "of kids and older people and animals." They have pretty big writing and pictures, and she really likes to just look at the pictures. She just turns the pages, and she's showing me the pictures that she likes the most, which seem to be the ones with kids and parents in the park or something. And there's a dog running around, and she's amazed. Carla really got the sense that this hybrid child wanted to live on Earth and felt kind of sad that she hadn't experienced these things. Carla did her best to comfort her, so it was really quite a poignant experience for Carla, as Carla did her best to explain what Earth life was like. So there's another very interesting case of E.T. books. In this case, it's different from the others in that these E.T. books are mostly about life here on Earth. So I did find other cases. When I started doing research on this, I put out a call on Facebook, on social media, asking if anyone had had this type of experience. And I got some very interesting responses. As for example, one lady, Karen is her name, replied positively, and I'll just read what she wrote. She says, "Yes, I was shown a book on 2 different occasions, or 2 different experiences. I can share the first one with you. I was taken on board a craft and was told to sit and wait, and I didn't know why. When a tall, off-world being walked up to me and told me to come with him. He was similar looking to a Nordic, with shoulder-length hair, and wore loose-fitting clothing with a gold sash-type cloth wrapped around like a belt, which I thought was pretty. I felt no fear. We walked to an area where you could see a long ways out, like a viewing screen, which had rows of records, like a library would, that went on a long ways. He picked up a book, which was thick and had a brown leather-looking cover, which was aged. And the book had a lock on it, and he wanted to tell me about the book, but I was not allowed to see the pages. He said names were in it, and it was a record of life, and I asked if my name was in it, and he said I needed to live out my life, and many things were to come about on Earth, like earthquakes and events that we had to go through. He had an aura of peace and love that I never felt before, and I didn't want to leave. He said I had to go, but to remember, I have the keys of the kingdom inside me. So that's one case. And another very interesting case comes from a contactee by the name of Sky. And I will just quote from Sky directly. In a dissection I was guided through during one of my abductions, they showed me a book. The book played a holographic video tutorial on how to dissect the creature I was working on, with oddly written words within it. So this contactee was actually doing a scientific experiment, which involved the dissection of an animal, very much like kids do in school here on Earth. And as the witness says, I remember stating that I didn't want to hurt any life form and wanted the least painful and invasive way of dissection. They handed me a large book, think of photo album book size. The pages were thick and a very light gray, almost white color. When there was a picture, all I had to do was focus on it, and it played a holographic black and white video tutorial on how to extract DNA from the being I was working on. There were many pages. My abductors didn't say anything to me. They just watched me as I watched the tutorial and waited for me to complete my task. So those are some of the more interesting cases I heard from people on social media, though I did get some other responses. What was really interesting is a lot of people did remember being handed a book and reading it, but couldn't remember what was inside. This is what happened to a lady by the name of Leah, who says, I have been given a book on board a craft, twice now. I don't remember what was in it at all. It was a brown and thick book. Another lady by the name of Lynn says, yes, in my room on the starship, I had my own book that I read. I felt cozy reading it. I would lay in bed with it. It seemed to be in different lettering, but I understood it. I can't remember what I read, only that I enjoyed it. And a third case comes from a gentleman by the name of Brian. And he writes that he saw a book and that it was, quote, large, photo album large or more. Book standard, rectangular, was on a desk, in a room of light. It was always occupied by one entity, a benign presence if ever there was. It appeared as, like the desk, had not been noticed initially. The book appeared on my last encounter, and my experiences would soon be drawn to a close in that era of the 70s. He drew a line on it, and I cannot emphasize enough the anxiety. So those are the cases I was able to get from people after requesting if anyone had had this experience. But the reason I wanted to do this video is because of a lady by the name of Dolly Saffron. Dolly is the subject of my latest book, Symmetry, A True UFO Adventure. Dolly is a fully conscious contactee. And when I started talking about ET books, like the Betty Andreasson case in particular, but Betty Hill and the others, I asked her if she had had this experience, and she said yes, she did. And I did write about this in the book, and I'd like to just tell you a little bit about what Dolly experienced. According to Dolly, the ETs do have a huge library of knowledge, and they do have actual physical libraries and Kindle-like electronic devices, which she says, and I quote, it works off of your mind. It listens to what you want, and it will get it over to you. They love to read. Reading is a big thing, but it's mostly real scientific. Astronomy is a real big thing of mine. I always like to figure out what star system I'm in and how it correlates to where I'm at. So I read a lot of those. I look at a lot of those. I look at a lot of maps and coordinates and things like that. But what's even more interesting is that Dolly says she has her own alien book that she has read many, many times. It was given to her when she was a very young girl. She has her quarters on the craft, and that's where it stays, in this little cubbyhole. And I'll just quote Dolly what she says about this E.T. book, because it is so interesting. As Dolly says, "It's a fairly hefty book. It's mine when I'm up there, and I've had it most of my life. It is a book of not laws, but morality and common sense. It has a lot of sayings in it. It has the philosophy of the universe in it. It has understanding and wisdom and aphorisms to look up. It's a weird book because it can change. I don't know how to explain it because it's not always the same book with the pages in the same place at the same time. You can read one thing and go back and still have questions, and it will elaborate. It will keep going with you until you get it. It will even show you pictures of things. And it's not metallic, but it's iridescent blue, beautiful, like a sapphire. Well, not a sapphire, but like one. When I was ever in trouble and they would give me dead air, like stare at me hard, like what the hell? What did you just do? And it was up to me to figure it out, sometimes I consulted the book. I was so at a loss that I'd go look. What the hell did I do? It had lessons about life in it that are profound, and other things in it that are elemental things, how life works, and it never ends. I've never read it cover to cover. I've never been able to. I don't think you can. And I think it changes wherever you're at. It has pages, but they're not typed on like we have. Each page is iridescent, opaque light, like glass, movable, soft glass. It moves. And I've literally seen something appear on the page. And I keep thinking it's something like a computer they have. It's like, go back to school and figure that one out. It's a type of computer that's an aid. And the cover is the quality of sapphire, like a gem. You think it's metal, but it's not. It looks like a gem, like sapphire. According to Dolly, this book is about 8 inches thick, about the size of a large encyclopedia. However, when she first saw it, it was much smaller, just an inch or two thick, and over the years it has grown in size. As Dolly says, "I will tell you this, I've had that book my whole life. It has changed my whole life, and it may have actually gotten bigger during my lifetime. I think it was smaller when I was younger, and it's bigger. It will play music too. If you think a song, you want to hear something, and you want to hear the music, it will play. You'll hear it." Dolly was, of course, forbidden to take any objects or artifacts off the ship. It was something she never even considered trying, but one day she did think about taking this book home. And boy, did she regret it. As Dolly says, "I tried to once. It was not helpful to try, and it got taken from me. I made it home with the book, and it went poof. So that was the end of that. I never tried it again. It's still on board in my quarters, next to my bed, like a little cubby, and it's in the cubby." The ETs told her that she's never to take that book away from the ship, that it could be very dangerous in the wrong hands, as it contained a lot of very important information. And they kept it away from her for a little while, but did eventually return it to her. So now what I'd like to do is actually play you a little interview I just did with Dolly, in which she reveals even more information about this book and her experiences with it. So here we go. Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you all to my friend Dolly. She's the subject of my new book, Symmetry. And today we're going to be talking about her experiences with an alien book. And for those of you who don't know Dolly, she's a fully conscious contactee, has been since age 14. Her encounters began really before age 1 and are still continuing today. It's quite an amazing story. And for those of you who've read the book Symmetry, you already know some of this. For those of you who haven't, this will be new for you. And yes, we're going to be talking about the Alien book. So hi, Dolly. How you doing?
Hi, I'm really good. I'm
So,
here.
so thanks for doing this. I'm super excited because every time I talk to you, I learn new information. And we did do a little section on this Alien book in the book Symmetry, but I'm sure I'm going to find out some new stuff today. So yeah, if you could just tell me a little bit about when you first read this book and what it looks like, and we'll start there.
Okay. My not so conscious memory that I sort of regained as I got older was the first time I saw this book. It was in my quarters and it was laying on my bed when I entered. And I was probably about 8.5, 9 years old. I remember staring at it and thinking, what is this? I sat down next to it on the bed. I put my hands on it and I immediately realized that this book was psychic and that it had something to say to me. I opened it. It's quite large. It's about yearbook size, a little bit bigger than a high school yearbook, very heavy. And the front of the book looks like a sapphire, an opaque sapphire. The whole front of the book.
Wow.
It's quite beautiful. When I opened it, it had thickness to it, and I laid it aside, the cover, I laid it open. And inside I saw immediately that the book was radiating light. And my name was on the next page.
Oh, wow.
It is not my name, Dolly. I am not called Dolly by the ETs. I'm going to tell you something that you know, but nobody else knows. And that is, my name is Ora. And Ora. And that was the name on the front of the book, Ora.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you. I was shocked as I realized this is my book. And I was quite excited. I thought, ooh, and I thought it would be like a diary at first. It's the first impression I got from it. And it's very far from that. I started turning page after page. And what I started seeing were some things I knew, and it was elaborating on, and then some things that I didn't already know. And it moved. The writing moved. It gave me 3D pictures. It gave me music. It gave me different strange visual effects. It was very, very, very cool.
So can we back up a second? When you say like these pictures moved, was that like, film? Like true life pictures?
Yes. It's like watching TV sometimes.
Oh,
3D
wow.
TV. They lift off the page. They lift up like holograms.
Oh, wow.
And they are quite interesting. Some things I saw from my past. Some things were teaching me what I missed, that I didn't understand. Some things were current events in my life and the world per se. When I was very young, everything pertained to a moral issue. Good versus evil, right versus wrong, karma, different elements of how would you feel if, things like that. It was very psychological in a lot of respects. And it was teaching me to be present, emotionally, morally, spiritually present. Those were some of my very first lessons.
So you said you saw words. Were these like in English writing?
No. I speak Swedish as well as English, talade svenska, and I was reading Swedish quite a bit.
Oh, wow. So it was in
Yeah.
Swedish.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They have a language as well, and I don't remember learning the language, but I know the language, and it would speak to me sound bites in the language of the Greys, and so I would hear that from time to time.
So is that out loud or telepathic?
Yes, telepathic. I can hear it telepathically.
All right. Okay,
Everything I hear telepathically is, I hear it like I hear you speaking, but it's telepathic. There's nothing going on around me. I can hear it.
all right. And these pages, were they thick as paper?
No, they were thicker.
All right.
They were very substantive. In other words, they had a little bit of weight to them, but they were flexible, which amazed me. It's sort of like silicone in a weird kind of way. Photocelled silicone. If you got to feel the inside of a craft, the walls feel like that too. They're thick. They have they're substantive. They're not like a regular wall that you've ever felt. And
so kind of
like that.
Like a photo album. Some photo albums had that those kind of thickish plastic-like sheets.
Yeah.
Wow. Very, very interesting. And how many pages would you say it was? If you had to...
When I was very young, there was probably about 50 pages in it. I never actually counted them, and they're not numbered, so I don't know exactly.
That was another question I had. Were they numbered? No.
No number. They would multiply as I got older, though. I mean, it got thicker and thicker and thicker. And depending on what I had to remember or what I was studying, it stayed there until I accomplished it. And then it would disappear and something else would show up. This book rearranges itself constantly. It's constantly adding or detracting according to what I need. And I'm constantly learning. So if I'm thinking about something, it will add it in for me. It knows what I'm thinking. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that leads to another question I had. This is interesting because some of the other people that I, found cases that I'm doing in this video describe similar things. But one thing I'm interested in is, this book is interacting with you to some degree. Does it have a consciousness? Is it aware? I mean, how does that happen? Is it in itself alive in some way? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Okay, this is complicated, and this is somewhat my opinion, but I think I'm talking from knowledge. ETs interact OBE all the time. They go out of body. They have access to the Akashic Library. They have access to the All Mind. They're constantly interacting with the universe's mind. They have all their minds as well. I think that every single being in the universe has a book. And I think it originates in the Akashic Library. And I think that they have the ability to facilitate you to your book. I've spent time in the Akashic Library, and from time to time, I see my book there. It manifests there somehow. And remember, I told you there's a big tree when you first walk into the library, and it's full of gems and stuff like that. And I sit under that tree a lot. I love it. It's like I meditate under it. It's my spot. And it has shown up in my lap a couple times and then left after I finished my OBE. I've never seen it anywhere else manifest like that. If I'm on a different craft, it will follow me to the next craft. I don't always fly with Talata. Sometimes I go other places.
All right.
And it'll show up. It follows me.
So on that vein, Talata, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is the ship Dolly flies in. That's his name. He's alive and is one of her main contacts. So this book will actually appear on the other ships. You don't have to carry it with you.
No. You can pick it up and walk around with it, to be sure. It's tangible. Okay. But it shows up. It somehow manifests into another area. It's like they're sending it to me somehow. I don't know. It has the ability to do that. Yes. I think what they're doing is they're sending it through a light door. In other words, they, how we transport quantum, interdimensionally. I think that they send it to me that way. They know where I am, and so they bring it to me.
All right. So when you're on the craft, and it's normally in your quarters, have you ever shown this book to other people on the craft?
Mama, I've actually sat with it in my lap next to Mama and talked to her about it. I do not take it with me when I'm flying. It does not, I can't. That is not an appropriate place for it to be. One time when I was out of the galaxy, I was out in, across the universe pretty much. I was on a planetoid, like a Dyson sphere, and it manifested into my room. And I was reading it and I forgot where I was, and I walked in to go eat, and I had it with me when I was eating, and just sitting there reading it, and other people were like watching me. Nobody talked to me about it, but they knew that I was in my lap, and they kind of left me alone with it. It was my impression from them that they knew exactly what I was doing. They knew exactly what it was, and they gave me my space. So.
Oh, wow. Very, very interesting. Okay, so could you describe the cover again? Because you said at one point it changed actually. So it's like sapphire. Is that metallic, or you said it's like
No,
a jewel?
it's like a real jewel, like a real gemstone. It has weight like one too. It's very thick and it's opaque. It's not a clear see-through gem. It's kind of opaque, but it shimmers with light. There's light in it somehow, and it fascinates the holy, what out of me. I mean, the book itself has over the years become very personal to me. The binding of the book is somewhat identifying of me. It has scroll work at the top, like little lines. And then my initial S is there for my last name. And then on the binding itself are crisscrosses that have blades, sword blades, broadsword blades on it. 3 down, it's 3 of big, 2 blades each, opposite each other, going down the binding of the book. That means something to me. And then on the back of the book, I'm really interested in dragons. I love dragons. I have been fascinated with them my whole life. And I was reading when Aragon came out, it was a blue dragon, and it did something to me. My heart just melted for this beast, okay? And I loved it. I mean, I fell in love with this blue dragon. And I had the book one day and I flipped it over to look for something in the back. And there on the back was a beautiful, beautiful blue dragon. And it was gorgeous. I mean, just beautiful, over the top and down the side of the book with little markings down each 2 sides of the, at the bottom and on the side, little scroll works. And I was like, look, there's a blue dragon. And the book sort of like signaled to me, this will be here for as long as you want it to be. It's yours. It's your dragon. And I was like, and it's still there. I've never asked it to leave. I love that blue dragon. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, Betty Andreasson, she also described a blue book with white glowing pages and symbols, and she was able to take it home. Or they gave it to her and said, you can keep this for 2 weeks. Don't show it to anybody. She ended up showing it to her daughter, Becky, who also confirmed and saw it. So I understand you tried to take this book home at one point.
Yeah. I was about 17 years old and I was leaving the craft and nobody was really paying attention to me. And I had it on my chest. I was cradling it. And I was just being very nonchalant. And I went out the door to grab an energy ribbon that drops me to the ground. And I hear, nope, the book disappeared out of my hands. Oh. I was like, dang it. And I was like, no. I asked Mama the next time I went up, why can't I take my book home? And they said that I lived with very nosy people. And no. And I can only imagine, I have my idea about who would be the nosiest. And that was the end of that. No, it was not going into my environment. No.
And did you get at all in trouble for that? I mean, did they?
Yes, they yeah, well, I did something without permission. I thought about it. I implemented a plan to do it. And I had to come up with understanding why that was not okay.
And they kept the book away from you for a little while?
Yes, 1 whole month. No book.
Oh, wow.
That was excruciating bad.
Shame on you. Yeah, so for those who don't know, Mama is a tall gray and
Yes.
Dolly's one of your main contacts. Her
Yes.
and Talata. All right. Gosh, very interesting. That reminds me of some crash retrieval accounts where, uh, from government whistleblowers who tried to move stuff out of the UFOs and were not able to do it. It would disappear and go back inside.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Well, the ship was telling it to come back. Yeah. Yeah. No, you don't stay outside. No. Yeah. They
so cool. So does this book have like it's and is it does it have fictional stories in it or is it all like
no,
true nonfiction?
nonfiction. They do not spin yarns. Sometimes they will sing songs about our yarns. They will tell about our fictional characters. They will relate stories about us in that context, but they're telling a truth about what we think. And that's the whole point. They only tell the truth. They only explain things as they truly are. History is very important to them, and I have learned all kinds of history from them, but they never, ever, ever lie. They are incapable of it. So you won't ever get non-truths or stories.
So
They don't entertain themselves that way.
so when you're looking through this book, is it uh, are there sometimes only words, or are there always words and pictures and the whole
I
thing?
get sometimes I get almost like a poetic um oh God, how do I explain this? Talata would teach me through poetry. He would write things to me. He would write words to me that would touch me. Okay. He was very good about doing that. Mama would sometimes send me messages that way, especially if I was forlorn about something or frustrated. She would use words that I emotionally attached to. Humans are very emotional in their talking and their thinking, and so that's when words would show up. Explaining things in detail, mostly mathematics would show up. I could write in the book if I needed to, if I was working out a problem, astronomical symbols, things like that. Yes.
Well, very interesting. Of all the accounts I was able to find on this, I think the one from Jeff Selver matches yours the most because he talked about how it had holographic images and taught spirituality and morality, personal stuff, and stuff that
Yeah.
also related to the world and the universe. Very cool. Very cool. So I suppose at times you're reading it can be quite emotional for you.
Yes. Very, very, very. We're emotional creatures. So are they. And they teach morality through uh, understanding from the point of unconditional love. And if you break that, if you walk away from it, or if you do something that is demonstrative of you not understanding that concept in that particular arena, whatever you're doing, they will give you an emotional go-to to bring you back into line with it. Emotions are very important. Yes.
Very cool. So can you share just, to kind of wrap this up, one of your favorite things that you've seen in this book? I know there's a
Um,
lot. That's probably a hard choice.
that is. That's a really hard choice. I did a needlepoint to this because this is the one set of words that gripped me, completely gripped me. They showed me a picture of the known universe, not like our pictures where you see a micro uh, shot of one teeny tiny section of the universe. They actually brought it all up into view to me and showed me a huge wide chasm of what the known universe actually looks like. Now understand that if there's not a lot of dark places between the galaxies, it's very full and it's got a lot of stuff going on. One of the things that amazed me was that there is plasma dust that's very thick between our universes, and we touch each other, plasma filaments, like we're all connected, like a neural net. Okay. And it astounded me. And Mama wrote the words and then she said the words. And basically it was a poem, and it was the one that's to see the world in a grain of sand, and eternity an hour. And that one. And it went straight into my chest. I was like, you know, it connected me to everything in 1 second, literally that fast. And I bawled like a baby. I went down on the floor, sat there rocking and crying like I've never done in my entire life. And it changed me. I went in that moment from being a child in my thinking to being an adult. I understood in that moment exactly what it all really was and where I placed in it and how bloody incredible it is. I mean, just incredible. There are no words that I could give you that would tell you exactly what this means to me. I found the needlepoint for it, and I needle pointed it, and it's still in this house with me.
Wow.
I never framed it, but I have it in a drawer, and I look at it from time to time. I showed it to you. It is very significant to me, yes.
Very beautiful, very poignant. Thanks so much for sharing this, Dolly.
You're welcome.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add about this incredible alien book? It's so cool.
Every single human, every single entity, everything, all entities across the board have a book. It is at your disposal. It is probably sitting in the Akashic Library. And if you want to learn how to go get it, you need to meditate, learn to OBE, go to the library and ask. And I'm pretty sure it will be handed over to you. You may only be able to see it there until it can manifest to you wherever you're at. I don't know that our world is pure enough for this book to show up here, but I know that if you went to the library, you would be able to open your book.
Wow. Reminds me of a dream I had. We're very vivid with this book. It's like the book of life with glowing pages and pictures that moved. Very Harry Potter-esque.
Yes. Very, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that was
there.
mine.
Something to achieve. Yeah, go for it.
Very cool.
A treasure of treasures, yes.
Well, thanks, Dolly. This was amazing. I can't thank you enough.
You're welcome.
So I guess bye for now, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
All right. So that is the interview I did with Dolly about her amazing experiences with this ET book. And after that interview, I told her how her case matches up closely with others. And we started talking about Betty Hill. And I explained to her that Betty Hill actually wrote down the symbols she had seen in her book. Dolly had never seen these, so she asked me to send them over to her. And when Dolly saw them, she was amazed because she knew what these symbols meant. Remember, for those of you who have read the book Symmetry, Dolly was taught how to fly this craft. And seeing Betty Hill's symbols, she knew what they meant. And she was floored. So what I'd like to do real quick here is just give Dolly's translation of Betty Hill's symbols seen in the ET book. There's 10 symbols, as you can see here. And Dolly says that this is actually sort of like a flight instruction manual, with the first symbol representing an ET craft. The second is indicating a right-hand turn. The third is turning up and then down. The fourth is straightening up and moving forward. The fifth is to remain level. The sixth is a view of a heads-up display. The seventh is again to move up, skiff upwards. The eighth is a power up symbol. The ninth is to take off at speed. And the 10th is a full stop. So this is Dolly's translation of these ET symbols as seen by Betty Hill. And if anyone should know, it's Dolly. Again, she's a fully conscious contactee who has been trained by the ETs how to pilot the craft. Her experiences with this are not unique. Many other people have told me how they've been trained to fly these craft. But never in as much detail as Dolly. So that's really interesting information that I really wanted to share with you today. And those are Dolly's experiences with this really interesting alien book. And as you can see, her experiences are not unique. This is very much what Jeff Selver described, Betty Andreasson, and the other witnesses. So yeah, ETs do have books. Again, Dolly's experiences are written about in my brand new book, Symmetry, A True UFO Adventure. The Betty Hill case and the Betty Andreasson case I did write a little bit about in volume 3, not from here, but these other cases for the most part are unpublished or are appearing in different books. So these are the alien books, and clearly there's enough cases that we can say they do exist. A lot of people have seen symbols and alien languages on board UFOs, often on screens and things like this. And in fact, Nancy Dutertre, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, Nancy Dutertre wrote a very interesting book, How to Talk to an Alien, which is really focusing all about alien languages. And it has a lot of these symbols. Doesn't talk about alien books so much, but I do think it's related to all this, so I thought I would mention it. So yeah, that is basically the presentation I wanted to give to you today. Aliens do have books, and they're very profound, and generally speaking, are talking all about spirituality. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I really want to thank you once again for listening and watching. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, keep searching for answers, keep looking for the truth, and most important of all, keep having fun.